Okay, let's get started. So we usually like to start with our round robins. Oh, hey, Brooke. We'll go around to folks who are joining on Zoom and folks who are in person. You can tell us your name, the organization you work with, and if you have any updates on things you're working on or questions for the group or things you'd like to collaborate on. This is your chance to do so. So we'll just get started with those. Maybe I'll go over to Zoom and I see Bryn first on my screen.
Everybody. See you all. Not a ton of updates on our end. I am working through compliance through our very first receipt of approval from the governor's emergency suspension for the environmental protection plan. If anyone else has experience working through some of the requirements in that protection plan, I'd love to talk with you about your experience and compare notes on how we move forward with this new process. We're working on that for our project over in Sonoma Valley. And then additionally, we are looking to put together a couple of larger grant applications for that location through California Fire Foundation and potentially through the Forest Health Grant Program in the next couple of weeks. So lots going on there. And again, would love to hear about anyone else's experience who's been working with that governor's emergency suspension.
Thanks, Bryn. Great. And there might be some people here who have experience with that. So feel free to reach out after or give a little update now. I'll go over to the people in the room now. Christopher, do you want to give a little update?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Sage, a landowner from West County, Occidental to be specific. I'm on the steering committee here of the Forest Conservation Working Group, another role. We just hosted a public bird pile workshop with the University of California Cooperative Extension. Had a good turnout of 20 people. It's our third year having these bird pile workshops, so we're very pleased there's still interest. Lots of people showing up, and more that can't make it or one thing or another. But so that's one thing. The second thing I would just report is I've been working with Bodega Land Trust and the RCDs on the Tannery Creek Reserve on the stakeholder engagement process. If you're familiar with the Tannery Creek Reserve, is on the backside of Joy Road, Taylor Lane that drops off, goes all the way down to Bodega Pastures. That whole watershed, 187 acres. It's a conservation easement. And we're trying to build trust, rapport, communication, coordination, and collaboration of the community, all the neighbors there, with what's going on inside the reserve. There's a forest management plan being developed right now by others in the RCD side and consultants. And we're looking for the neighbors to participate primarily in volunteer capacity in different interest areas. So we just had a one-day event recently and had, what did we say, 42 showed up? 42. Patty was there. Rose was there. Adriana was there from the RCD. So good turnout on that.
Nice. Great. Thank you. Maybe we'll go back up to Zoom. I see Adriana next on my screen.
Hey everyone, good morning. Adriana with the Gold Ridge Resource Conservation District. Yeah, we have been, sorry I came a little late, so I only heard part of Bryn's update, but the RCDs with Sonoma RCD and Conservation Works are preparing a resubmission of a CAL FIRE Forest Health Grant, same as the one we put in last year, virtually the same. And we are putting in the pre-proposal now, and then the full proposals will be due in June. So yeah, it's exciting to put that through. It'll be, I don't know if Patty's already shared some of the news, but it serves 5 communities or five areas of Sonoma County, from the Cooley Ranch in the north to Gallo Vineyard, kind of in the Santa Rosa East. Let's see, Mark West Creek in the Mark West area, east of Santa Rosa, northeast of Santa Rosa, and then the Oddfellows property in Forestville, as well as several properties in the Bohemian, Campmaker, Occidental area in the West. So it is kind of a complicated project, but we're excited and we'll be rolling out in phases if we're funded. And it is the result of quite a number of years of communications with these landowners, learning what they need, and how we can help them address some of their forest health issues. So we have our fingers crossed. We'll see what happens. And yeah, and then other updates. I think the other updates that I have to share are probably going to be shared by other folks in the room, so I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go back into the room for Patty's update.
Hi, I'm Patty Aaron. I'm with the Sonoma Resource Conservation District. As Adriana said, we're working hard on the pre-proposal for the Forest Health Grant. The other big thing we have going is we've been contracted by the North Coast Water Boards to assist with community outreach for a permit that they're working on. And there is going to be a meeting at an in-person meeting on April 9th at the Gualala Point Regional Park Visitor Center. And there'll also be a virtual meeting a few days later. We don't have the exact date yet, but that'll be coming out and it'll be the exact same information. They just don't have the facilities, the capability at the Regional Park Visitor Center for a hybrid meeting. So that's it for us. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, back onto Zoom. What about Fred? How are you doing?
I'm doing good. A little bit busy over here, but finishing up, it's pretty boring stuff, folks. Finishing up management plans, getting ready for doing some contracting, and um, I put in 5 grants for NB, FIP, and got all of them turned down. So I'd like to get a little bit of discussion going today, if possible, about what's going on. I hear that 80% were turned down, and I've also heard 5 different reasons for being turned down. So I just want some clarity on that.
I can
Next.
answer that a little later, Fred, or we can just talk about it a little later if there's time.
Well, needless to say, the clients all have different ideas, and the rumor mill is very active. So we need clarity.
Okay. Okay, good to know.
That'll be good.
Oh, well,
That'll be
good. We should know about that.
We're here, Fred. We're here to talk about that. So
Sarah and Emma.
Sure. We could just kind of swap the order and have you all go if you want to just follow up with any NB FIP.
sure.
Okay.
Thanks for introducing us, Fred.
It was going to come up. Don't worry.
I know. I'm Sarah Kaiser with Conservation Works. We oversee the North Bay Forest Improvement Program, which is currently funded by CAL FIRE, and the RCPP, which is the Regional Conservation Partnership Program funded by NRCS. And we will be the lead agency on the Forest Health Grant that Sonoma RCD and Goldbridge are co-applying. We're one of that will be the applicant and hopefully help with program management, and there'll be administrative stuff that we have kind of honed our skills on. With NBFIP, we just finished our batch 8 application, and we can dig into that deeper a little bit here, Fred, but we can also, feel free to call me and I can walk you through who was awarded and why. I will tell you, we awarded there was over $10 million in applications, and we awarded $1.2 million in awarded project to landowners in 4 counties. And it's based on a ranking system. And so we can go over that ranking system. So it's really essentially taking the top chunk of people based upon our ranking system. And also identifying some projects, and I don't want to go too deep in this because I know we're just doing introductions, but we also have to make sure that projects that are really expensive are hard for us to fund through NBFIP, because we have limited funding. So if they're like $1 million or $500,000 project, that's hard for us to be able to award because we only have 3.2 million in awarding. And we did put out, a bunch of FMPs. So we have already funded 53 FMPs just through this round of funding. So that's us, and we're here to talk. And anybody who wants my number or has specific questions about the program, you're welcome to call or email me directly too in the future. And I'll let Emma talk to you since she's on our team.
Well, I'll introduce myself. Hi, I'm Emma Guzzi. I'm the other piece of the NBFIP program through Conservation Works, and I assist with invoicing CAL FIRE, which is no easy feat. But yes, we love to answer questions and to bring clarity and help people understand because it's a very complicated program. So and we're always looking for ways to make it better.
Yes, that too.
Great, thank you. Okay, we'll go back out to Zoom and talk to Jill. How are you doing?
Hi, there's two Jills here, but I'll
Oh,
jump in. I'm Jill Templeton, GIS analyst in Marin County and Napa County, and a tiny little landowner in Gurnwood Park. And we recently had a shaded fuel break project completed. I think it's called Pool Ridge, but I'm not sure about that. I see Kim's on the call. He probably knows. And I just wanted to see how projects are going and how they're being funded and how they're being maintained.
awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Okay, and I guess what about the other Jill Butler? How are you doing?
Good morning, Jill Butler representing Gully River Watershed Council. And just two updates in the past month. We did sign or I guess I should say drafted an MOU with Judy and Coast Ridge Community Forest. So we're excited about working more with them in the future. And we were also just contacted in the last couple of weeks by a group that's doing another management plan process in part of the watershed. I think I'm not up to speed yet, but I think they're looking at the North County and maybe the Wheatfield Fork of the Gully. That's kind of it for us. We've been waiting for the road system to dry out, which is probably happening before we start monitoring work again for the spring.
Thank you, Jill. Okay, I'm going to talk to some folks in the room. I think Kathleen is next.
Kathleen Kraft. I'm resident at Lanpes Ocean Song Myers property, where I'm engaged with some of their projects in trying to save the coastal prairie out there. There have been some burn projects. There's still some going on patch burning. They're doing it now. Seems to help. And then also fuel load reduction along the roadsides. They've done quite a bit of that. And they seem to be quite active there. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us. Okay, and then I think we have a few more people on Zoom. What about Jennifer Coleman?
Hi, thanks for putting on this this webinar. I manage property for 40 years, and I'm interested, just out of curiosity, just to keep up with what's going on, and it's an interesting subject. So thank you.
Great, thank you for joining us. And then I'll go to the last person I see on Zoom, Jason Mills.
Hi guys, sorry I'm transporting a sick kid from school here, but wanted to make it in person for Brock's presentation, but doing the best I can. Yeah, we have been very busy, mainly with strategic invasive plant control efforts. We just wrapped up a 15-acre manual pull for French broom in the Mill Creek, Palmer Creek watershed, thanks to the Sonoma RCD, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation funds. And we were lucky to get a jump on that early when the ground is wet, because it's drying up quick. And now we're doing spot sweeps, and we're easily identifying the brooms we miss because they're in full flower. So that's going really well, and I'd love to get a group out there to show you all the work. It's really pretty incredible. And then we did a little spot acre pull for a spot population of Scotch broom up there in the Jenner Headlands, and that went really well. The ground was still wet. We got it all out, and then we followed up on another broom pull we started 2 years ago for an HOA in the heart of Santa Rosa, and we took 4 acres of broom out, and this time it was down to about an acre left. So we were able to get all that treated before it went to seed, and then shifted over to get back at the ivy, and we knocked English ivy back by a few acres, and we're able to work around a bunch of pipe vine out there. So feeling pretty great about that too. And then we have some events coming our way. We're going to be attending the Fire Safe Sonoma Wildfire Leadership Mitigation Summit this Saturday at Sonoma State. I'm going to be meeting with the Marin Wildfire Protection Authority next week to meet with some land managers down in Marin County, Marin Water, state parks, county parks, and some other folks to go over strategic broom management. And I think, oh, and then I'm doing a class next week for Santa Rosa JC, a week-long fire resiliency course. So covering a lot, doing the best I can to help. Thanks so much. Can't wait for the meeting. Oh, and this is Jason Mills of Fire and Restoration Ecologists for Ecological Solutions. Should have started with that. Thanks, you guys.
Great update. You're so busy, Jason. And that would be fun to go see that broom project. So
Oh, it'd be so great. Maybe next month. There's so much work to do out there, guys. Thanks all for helping.
great. Okay, and then I think we'll go back to the room, and we have Brock who's going to be speaking later, but you also want to give a little intro or update on what you're working on these days.
Brock Dahlman, landowner in Occidental, Sewing Circle community, and work for Occidental Ecology Center, and you're going to hear from me later.
Thank you. Okay, great. And then, oh, hey.
Hi. Well, Mim Allison, landowner on Myers Grade Road. And first, excuse me for being late, and also excuse me that I'm gonna have to leave before Brock's presentation. But I'm happy to be here at least for the planning session. I don't have anything to report.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And I'm Kim Batchelder. I work with Sonoma County Ag and Open Space as the Vegetation Management Coordinator. It's been a busy time. We have 9 checks in the mail for the grantees that I discussed last month. So that's exciting. And then we have, we did a really interesting tour of the potential prescribed burn sites along the Russian River. Mostly where we've already done shaded fuel break projects on the south side and the north side shaded fuel break sections. And so what we wanted to do is that a lot of the communities are interested about how do we maintain these? How do we go about trying to enforce what shaded fuel breaks are already in place? And so the intent of this group was to have Fire Forward, CAL FIRE, Sonoma County Fire District, Fire Safe Sonoma, and the RCDs join us on visiting these sites to decide exactly how we could implement some community level prescribed burns. And so we have some really good options, largely along Oddfellows on the south side, shaded fuel break, and then also on the north side. So we're developing a strategy on how we would raise some funds to be able to do those projects and get them done on the ground. The other thing I wanted to share is that as of this week, we will be finished with the Russian River, the north side Russian River shaded fuel break projects. They're wrapping up the Mount Jackson shaded fuel break section, which is the last one to get done. We do have some funds based on some landowner participation. We kind of had two landowners who didn't want to participate at the end of the day. And so we have some funds to be able to apply to another section called the Black Mountain Shaded Fuel Break. So we're asking for an amendment with CAL FIRE, and that takes a little bit of time for them to approve that, but we hope to get that done by next fall. But essentially, we knocked out a project that they gave us 5 years to implement it, and we knocked it out in 2 years. So very excited about the efficiency and the crew that Environmental Resource Solutions was able to put together. They used Gallego Precision as our principal crew, and just great job. And then finally, I wanted to share that you participated, many of you participated in a community outreach effort that the RCD and the Forest Working Group coordinated to get input on what we can do as far as wildfire resilience as a county. And so ERG has been the principal consultant that the county has used to help us to put those that bit of information together. And so they have completed their final report and submitted it to the county administrator's office. And so the CAO will be taking it to the board on April 14th to be able to share the recommendations from the consultant, and then what are the things that the county, how the Board of Supervisors wants to direct us from there. And so there's a lot of things such as a database to manage and track the different projects that are going on in the area, a collaboration that would consist of county as well as nonprofit organizations and groups that are working in the area, and really try to all move in the same direction instead of our little islands. And so that's kind of the objective of that. So that should come up on April 14th. If you guys want to participate in that, I encourage you to do so. And that's all I got.
Lovely. Okay, great. We're doing great with time on our round robins. I don't have any big updates to give, but I'm Rose. I work at the Goldridge RCD and help to coordinate this group. And I can just kind of bring us into our next segment of the meeting. So Christopher and I are going to walk you through a group planning session. We're going to identify some priorities for 2026. And this is based off of the work that we did in December. We sent out a survey to get community feedback. So we sent that out to everyone on the listserv and who gets our newsletter. And then in person at our meeting in January, we also did a big feedback session. We had people work in breakout groups and come up with basically ideas for what they want to see from the working group moving forward, things that they appreciate about the working group that they want to also have us continue working on. So we took all of those into account, and I'm just going to talk a bit about those and get your feedback right now. So I'll share my screen. Okay, slideshow. Okay, great. Can everyone see it okay? All right. So first, I just wanted to give a little reminder of the mission of the Forest Working Group, as officially stated on our website, so everyone can get a sense of the work that we're trying to do together. So our mission is to protect forests across landscapes and through generations. We work to perpetuate sustainable, healthy, diverse forests, woodlands, and watersheds across the Sonoma County landscape, and to be a catalyst, source of information, and point of contact for forest landowners. Just a little refresher. And then these were some of the common themes that we saw. So once we looked at the feedback we got in person over the survey and looked for the most popular kind of requests from the group or things that people enjoy getting from the Forest Working Group. And we broke it out into 5 major sections. So people are really interested in seeing peer-to-peer learning opportunities and support for collaborative efforts of community-based forestry groups and private landowners. So this could include things like last year we had a panel discussion where we had different community leaders from community forestry groups come, and we talked about their experiences, what they've learned, kind of shared different stories with one another and answered questions. So I think we got a big amount of interest in those kind of opportunities and things that we can do to support those collaborative groups of neighbors and landowners and those more organized groups that are all the way up to community forests with continuing to learn and also kind of building their capacity. And then the next one that we heard a lot is how can we increase outreach and engagement with private landowners and those community-based forestry groups. So here at the working group, we have a lot of great resources. We share a lot of great information, but we're not always reaching as many private landowners and community groups as we could. And so one request we had is to work on how to increase that outreach and engagement. And then number 3, this is a big part of the working group. We provide a lot of technical information, usually through presentations at our monthly meetings. And here are some subcategories of basically the most popular topics that we heard from you all. The implementation of forest management practices like thinning and pruning. Oh, look, I didn't add further explanation here, but I'll say it out loud. The wildfire resilience projects. Yeah. So this is, projects that are really focused on increasing wildfire resilience as opposed to a project that's coming in with a forest health lens or something like that. Wildfire resilience is a really popular topic. Vegetation management, like fuel reduction, invasive plant management, permitting and regulations, especially as we get more and more regulations and things change, getting updates on those. Funding opportunities. So this could be usually is grants and cost share programs, but we also have members who are interested in talking about new funding opportunities and things that could potentially work out with private funding or creative new models that we haven't thought about yet. Prescribed fire, broadcast burning, and pile burning, and then watershed restoration and wildlife conservation. So ways that we can link our forest management to watersheds and animals and the whole ecological system. And then the last 2 would be field-based learning opportunities. Folks are really interested in having site visits and maybe moving around the county. So we're not always in the middle here and getting out to the edges a bit more. And then we also had a few people speak up and say they want to think about how we can support youth education and workforce development more through our group. So those are our kind of big themes that emerged. And then I'll hand it over to Christopher to kind of talk through, we're gonna have interactive activity where we hear from you about our themes and what we should prioritize this year.
Thanks, Rose.
Yeah.
I just want to start by, I'm not sure everybody who's in the room and on the screen remembers the rationale for this planning process. So I just wanted to emphasize, we wanted to take a moment at the end of last year to reflect on what we're learning as the working group and get some feedback from the members on what's working well and what are some member needs and interests as part of a process to drive what we should be focusing on going forward in 2026. We're intentionally just calling this annual planning, not multi-year strategic planning. We may get to something like that down the road, but we just wanted to start a planning process that looked at 1 year and as input into the next year, being this year, 2026. So thanks, Rose. That's a great summary of the common themes that came out of the survey and our meeting in last January. Some of you were here for that, not everybody was, where we started talking about priorities. So now we really want to try to focus on what those priorities might be for 2026, focus areas, because we can't do everything. And so one thing we wanted to start with was criteria for priority selection. Again, we don't have time to go into deep dive on this right now, but we just, some of the members of the steering committee, we started a little list here just to give you an idea to help screen and think about what we're going to focus on in 2026. Just think for a minute about what criteria we might use. Does it support the work of our local partner? Importantly, is it achievable in 2026? Is it a doable thing not a long-term goal. Is it a good return on our investment of time and energy, given how busy everybody is? And does it build new knowledge and capacity of the working group? Basically, what we're trying to get there is, we want to be relevant as a working group. We don't want to just stay with status quo. What part of status quo is working well? And we should continue, that's totally fine. But if we stretch ourselves in some new interesting ways going forward, that's helpful to think about too. So anyway, you get the idea. Just think about criterion to guide this next interactive activity we're about to launch here.
Great. And then I'll probably switch the screen back over to the common themes so that people can reference them.
Yes, what we're going to ask you to do now, I know this is easier in the room because we can pair up, but maybe pair up with somebody new you don't know in the room that well, rather we spend a lot of time with you.
We
No,
do.
definitely not.
We know each other pretty well.
Every day of the week.
Exactly. And I'm sorry on the screen, just think for a second about this. Since we don't have breakout rooms on the Zoom function, you figured it out yet. We're still working to figure that out. What I want you to do is look at these common themes and think about 1 or 2 or 3 priorities for you in 2026 based on the common themes. Again, it might be a new way of saying something that's up there. It might be directly what's up there, either a bold thing or a sub piece. And we'll leave that up there so you can see it. And if you think of something new and exciting as an exciting possibility, that's a low-hanging fruit that we might want to consider to stretch ourselves in some new directions, that's fine too. And then we'll do a quick report out. So just take a couple of minutes. It could be 1 thing, could be 2, no more than 3. Let's try to keep it tight here, given our time constraints. Okay, we'll come back to you in a few minutes.
Sounds good.
How much time do you want to give us?
Let's just 8 minutes.
8 minutes.
Wow.
Got it. All right. You want that pair up?
Sure. Sure.
I'm gonna join.
Okay. We kind of know each other. We can get you.
Emma. Right? Yes, I have a reputation. I know how it's done.
Yeah.
About the words about it.
It's been
Now.
lots of people.
Yep. And then with us, the crazy part. I think
so. I know
that's
you all-
most important thing there that can be interwoven.
Yeah.
No, I'm with conservation work.
So the worst is like if we're doing pretty good system work. The field. And I think that
Yes, so,
I think that
yeah,
can be a piece of
like COVID grant.
outreach and engagement and
So the
I think
RCP
that's
brought it to conservation work, and that's just.
and see what the hell.
And we finally like got back everything into contract
Our
last.
ecosystem supposed to look like?
Yeah.
That conversation is not that,
Areas, it's been about a year or 2 actually.
No,
Yeah,
exactly.
back, we're finally getting
And
fish.
that's
Actually, so it's,
Manure.
it was a whole,
Right?
and
Yeah.
it's not on the team,
It's huge.
in the past year too, so Sarah was doing a lot of it
Original.
on her own, so, yeah, she actually did a little team on it, but it's up and running and touching again, but then it's like, no, we're funding. So.
Last meeting.
Yeah.
All right.
What do you think?
Yeah, we,
Feels.
Yeah, it's
That'd be
that
helpful,
one.
for this group.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I was
We're like,
trying to. Wait a minute.
is there kind of going over, yeah, no, that's exactly right. That was a big cheer.
But it's the same question.
Shifted and
Really kind of evolved and embraced. So whether it's like increased engagement, are we trying to get more people there? Or are we trying to get more community work there?
Yeah, right.
It doesn't even like.
So
It
what
was
are
like,
they?
a lot of things
That I think
myself.
Yeah.
It's fine now, and I'm
So like in the field with those groups, hitting those.
People.
Great way.
So-
And then just
Conservation.
I know, we got 63 after
last round. Or you have Nathan Mills.
I run the outreach
I
committee and I
think,
donated
okay.
to them. I was like, I did our outreach a little too well. Like, to actually get every.
You a really good party, but we didn't have enough on.
Exactly. So, yeah, it's just something that.
It's like identifying that route, chipping.
Their new product for.
Yeah. They're having like a grant
Outreach and all the others.
Not, and so it's for the wildfire
What do you
grants
think?
doing that again, and that's what we're funded for right now, and so they're putting out there right now, they're doing like.
Well, I think one would be you
Guidelines and like.
workforce development.
Yeah, right, I like that.
Or even.
Do it.
Necessarily.
And so that's on our.
So maybe like.
And yeah, that, yeah, we're gonna, that's what
I think it's
feel
really
very tricky about, that's the,
students.
they're very technical and.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of barriers just because of public.
That could be like a.
Have to do a lot of.
Yeah.
I know, I would never tell people.
Writers.
You know, I work for.
Yeah.
Behind the desk and behind the computer and I'm like, and I work with the world, but,
Yeah. All levels, right? From like.
so.
Work crews to like. high
Second
level
time,
courses
last time.
that, we're on different levels. And then, yeah, have young
First, and we're just, again,
Well,
it's
look,
like.
Bravo.
We come and we
You're
learn
interested.
Billions.
especially for years, we've been.
So I was very.
You're going to become a forester. It's not a stop, this designated place.
It'd be like, yeah,
The
the challenge is like,
So it's
Be
really
forced.
great to get to like interact.
If you're doing fire research.
Here and sit at the table and then also we can answer
Treatment areas.
we realized that it's not for us, like.
It's
Very well.
Supply
It's such a complicated program, like, yeah, so.
How did you develop?
Maybe we could
I'm
go.
excited to see what commission we have because I haven't read through this before.
That's they have treatment areas, and I know the regional park treatments for.
Yeah.
Like some of them out, regional park. So there
So-
might be a regional a treatment versus a non-treatment or something.
Yeah.
I just start this over again.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Shown.
Yeah.
Man.
That, for the landowners too, that.
Yeah.
That's one side where
Well,
you see lots of things.
Information and I like find myself interested in
We
the.
applied to get
connection
the
of
funding.
being-
and didn't get it.
Oh, yeah, right.
But I
I wish
wish we
we
had
had
that one. That would be a
Great,
great.
it's like $3 million now.
Yeah, there's places like
Kind of address that.
they might be engaging, you know.
Give some people.
You know, like, or what.
Yeah, it's crazy how.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'd be one, and then,
It's that.
other, yes, like.
Yeah, we know that, you know.
Yes,
So it's just-
but I
I would think
I
this
think
is like.
really interesting, I know something else, just from like. Not related to issues, like, we need more babies.
Neighbors.
And bring in the funders.
People are getting
How
in
you
the
do
program.
it.
so
Environmentally sound
the idea-
I don't know about any fit, but I mean, it's frustrating. I heard Fred.
They're cutting your forest to take care of fire.
That's why.
Yeah, we have to tell,
Your policymakers.
What's out there, right?
yeah, it seemed like, I don't feel like especially.
So like bring in the groups and then identify the resources.
Yeah.
All the-
Yeah, they don't know what they are not aware of. And the great thing about MBFIP, especially some of our West Coast people who are not
Funding
interested
stuff,
in
so.
Yeah.
getting their information.
Yeah, big rate.
Like,
Okay.
all they have to do is
Doesn't have a-
work with the RTDs and give us a W-9. If he's gonna look at their tax things, they do it on their own. They don't tell you to hire anybody. So it's
Right.
we try to create a program that is way more accessible.
Sorry, just another 1 or 2 minutes to wrap up.
All right, that's good.
We're done almost. We
Yeah.
gotta figure it out.
Almost, I'm here the almost.
2 minutes, we got it, 2 minutes.
Full.
So I always like to,
Should,
just to also highlight the resources.
Cover
our
Just
Oh,
forestry groups,
Part
like
of me beacon.
it's also the work groups.
How do we make
And
this?
then why don't we, or
How do they gain, they
labor
that support? What?
you started to have you or where it's a circus, right?
But these are non-regulatory.
You could leave it to that one, I could continue with that property, and then I could move on to the Nation, yeah.
Nation side.
Yes.
Yeah. Current ones cross over a lot, but I think the demand
Yep.
for
The environmental compliance.
Yep.
increasing.
Not always,
Conservation RPFs and.
Yes,
I don't
How
know
is
if
really
they're-
getting that
Then
hard,
we
like,
all of our treatments are
Gotta go to.
notice of exemption.
Oh, yeah, right.
They're not.
Yeah.
Down.
You said.
Yeah.
So what was your?
So that's an easy one. Our just some of these-
I heard it's a very, it's a very.
Yeah. So do either make or new ones.
Yeah.
He's out between commercials and residential. Cal Fire, either is there a way to back off or
Grant it out.
different?
Yeah, I think the scaled approach would be good. Like maybe the first year is an example of like a hand crew.
Yeah.
And the next year, what equipment would I accelerate to do the next stages, you know, and where are those treatments appropriate and where are they unnecessary? Like,
There's levels to
There are
it.
levels.
Yeah, I know.
at each level, what are your environmental?
Just those
open.
No, I'm not leaving. This is what I came.
You know, what's my critical zones? Obviously, we're not going on the property. How's that even critical zones?
Just tiny things.
Like walking the landscape, be like, here's where.
Because I started
My
Understanding
running
prior
late and I thought,
No,
how
no,
it travels,
no,
people to understand the zone structure, so like, if you only have so much money,
Couldn't be worth
where do I start my treatment?
Oh, yeah.
But,
A couple hundred acres.
And then Irish-
That's like, it seems like so much, they just can't even like.
Yeah,
do
you-
anything, so.
Again.
How do we pick those 2 or 3 acres?
6 miles or so north of them.
After so 150 years of that being done, they're like, oh, what can I do?
So
Correct.
No, I
That's
get
the
it.
perspective
I
of
would
just like
want
walking, and it would probably, that one would
Yeah,
probably be a.
Western,
Yeah.
Western front.
So.
Through a couple
Yeah.
of very specific.
So. Wood miles, no.
Here
we go.
All right, folks, let's bring it back together. Thanks people online for
They're not
thinking
actually
through this stuff. and
Training.
Hopefully listening in at all the great chats that are going on right now.
Okay, we're gonna do a quick report out. And in doing so, I'd like you to think about this. One is, I'm happy if you have one. Two's okay. Please don't stretch it out if you have 3 with a long paragraph narrative on every one. And what would be very helpful if you have something that's already been said by somebody else, you could just say, I agree with that other thing that was already mentioned. So we see where there might be a little emphasis percolating up here. Well, obviously the steering committee is gonna take what we get out of today and we're gonna process and work with it a little bit more.
Who's
and
the
we'll-
steering committee? I know you because you've met in public times.
He's the steering.
You know what?
committee,
Who's on it? I have to coordinate it. Kim's there, Adriana is there,
Fred.
Jason Mills, Fred, Dee, Jill Butler, and Tori.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, that's good.
9 of us. So we'll process more where we'll report back at the next meeting. So anyway, try to keep it short, succinct, to the point. And again, just share what you have. And if you're just repeating somebody's already said something, just emphasize, give some emphasis to it for us. Thanks. All right, let's go on the Zoom, bros. Maybe you can
Okay.
guide it over there.
Yeah, is anybody on Zoom feeling really excited to talk? I saw Bryn's camera turn on.
Sure, I can go. Permitting and regulations, it'd be great to hear more about how other people are approaching the way that they're doing their projects, just hearing like little case studies about how people got their permissions for stuff that they're up.
Great. Okay, case studies. That's a good idea. All right, I will be taking a lot of notes. Anybody else on Zoom? Fred, are you interested in giving us a little feedback? Some people might have also taken a little lunch break.
Rose, I can jump in if necessary.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think it's interesting trying to tease all this stuff apart. I'm always trying to connect implementation of forest managed practices with C, vegetation management, fuel reduction, invasive plant work with G, watershed restoration and wildlife conservation, because they're all intertwined in the web of life, right? So how we approach all these things has a lot to do with our perception, right? So I think our communication is instrumental to it all, and that's why these meetings are so important. But I would really love, for us to work towards a more holistic approach when it comes to managing our forests, really on a vegetation management scale by looking at the health of the ecosystem and how we can manage these fuels over time to steward the environment rather than think we can control it, right? Um, and then you see all of the benefits to wildlife along the way. So, we're learning, but I think we can do a better job of learning from each other through maybe more focused um, planning, scopes of work, budgets to align the scopes of work, mapping and tracking that work, and then maintaining that work, educating and developing the workforce, right, to make it all sound and have it all sing and do best for the county. So those are my 2 cents.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Jason, that sounds like you just did all 5 that are up there.
I want to do it all. You guys probably too, but yeah, Christopher,
Thanks, Jason. All right.
What about Adriana?
Hi. Yeah, I'm just mostly interested in listening into what the, members have to say about this. I'm sort of agnostic as, also helping to coordinate the group. So, yeah, just really interested in hearing what feels important to everyone else right now.
Great. Sounds good. And yeah, if anyone else on Zoom wants to share now, you can unmute, or we can come back to the Zoom folks after we share out in the room as well. Okay, and we'll go to the room. Yeah.
So Patty and I were a team, and Patty will start.
The first thing, we like the field trip ideas, and so we thought Jason Mill's idea of a field trip to Mill Creek to see the French broom pulling would be awesome. And then, to be brief, we have 3 bullet points. Then we moved on to, it would be great to have a presentation from Circuit Rider. And then Mim was going to expand on that.
Well, that opened up the door to my thinking concern about labor, getting help to get projects done. And that gets into the workforce development, or wondering about whether there could be a database created of sources where you could hire people that could do work. So I'm speaking from a landowner's point of view, where so much of the work that we need to do to maintain our forest and to address fire resiliency involves a lot of labor, and people like myself and my husband who are older are not getting out there and doing it ourselves. We need to find others. And when I think about what's going to be presented later on gully stuffing, that's probably one of the most labor intensive things I've ever seen. And so anyway, so
perfect for young people.
Yeah, perfect for young people. Then our third point is on addressing fire resiliency. And again, from a landowner's point of view, I can recall many years ago looking at many acres of forest and saying, how do I deal with this? How do I develop a plan? What's the best way for me to maintain this forest or be treated better since it was completely clear cut in the 1970s, and we've got a mess of regrowth after that. Anyway, to make this short, fire resiliency and tying that into the health of the forest and helping landowners determine priorities and determine resources, etc., for dealing with that.
Good, thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Pair number 1. Pair number 2.
Well, I think Christopher and Kathleen and I talked a bit.
Okay.
I wrote some notes, so I can say them out loud, but feel free to chime in. Kathleen talked about when thinking about vegetation management, thinking about the mosaic and making sure that we also talk about the understory and coastal prairie, which are, interspersed throughout the forest. And then thinking about invasives and that all of that, kind of like what Jason says, the wildlife depend on the continuum of all of those different ecosystems. And so it'd be great to weave that into our presentations. And then Christopher is really interested in enhanced support to community groups, and not just on a project basis, but thinking about helping them with capacity building and long-term sustainability. And then I talked about one of the technical topics I'm interested in is the connection between forest management activities and the watershed, water table, streams, salmon habitat, which we'll get to hear some about today. Great. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Nice.
Another pair group.
Brock and I were talking, and we were mostly just getting to know each other. But we did talk about supporting youth education and workforce development. And we were talking a bit about how, we need to get some more foresters in the game, which is just feedback that I've heard from other registered professional foresters. And that getting more people interested in the field of forestry, of conservation, and interested to see if this group can support any of that.
Awesome. Great.
And I was just gonna say, my sense in this list, number 3 there, is that the outputs of A, B, and C is organic matter. F and G are, F is a combustion narrative, but if we take the outputs of A, B, and C and we actually use them on site in organic ways, we can solve for F and G. And if we just got to change some things over on D and E on the permitting and funding game. So I need a new line up there that just says on-site beneficial biomass reutilization in a composting non-combustible framework. You're going to hear more about that.
Very concisely. Every time really cool.
My trailer for the film you're talking.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay.
All right, well,
That's good.
Sarah and I worked together, and I found out that Sarah is an extremely bright person, and she has some good ideas. So she's gonna report out on what we
I am.
found out.
Okay. Well, we just came from, so many of these things are interwoven into really getting people back on the land. So we were saying for 2026, have 2 field-based learning opportunities, which incorporate some of the other things you're trying to cover, because getting people on the land is really how we support their understanding of the treatment, support their understanding of the models, and it's step 1. And we were thinking 2 in 2026. One would be youth education and workforce development, where you'd be on the field, out in the field. They'd get people, we'd have circuit riders there, we'd have different legs of ways to go into this work, and foresters, and helping them identify the different fields they can go into and the stages up in those fields, depending upon the youth and their interest and what they want to do. So then incorporating that kind of as one of the visits.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was the community-based, bringing in the community-based forestry groups and landowners on the landscape, on a treatment, to help them identify funding opportunities, resources, hand crews, helping them understand, maybe even have a CAL FIRE or firefighter there that helps them identify on their landscapes where to start. Because when people own large forested properties, it feels completely ominous to have to manage 200 acres. But where do they do the first treatments? Where is the critical zones on their landscape with their infrastructure that gives them a startable place to start doing the treatments and be able to see a landscape where those treatments have been done and what that looks like. And navigating that system, and hopefully having some resources there like NBFIP and RCPP and other things that can help them fund some of those treatments. Those are the 2 things for 2026.
Yeah, and I think part of that was having landowners see good examples of treated areas so that they understand what a healthy forest looks like. We have more examples out there now. but a lot of people don't have access to those. And so it's great. And even on regional parkland, they've done a lot of interesting treatments where we can get people out and show them what a shaded fuel break looks like. So they're kind of demythicizing the that you have to put in a huge bulldozer lane to have a safe forest. You can do it with healthy forests as well.
Yeah, you don't have to moonscape. And what does a healthy forest look like?
Yes.
Yeah, people, a lot of people don't know, so that's step one. And it helps leverage that education into where they feel like they can at least start moving forward to do something. Yeah.
Perfect.
Nice. Wonderful. Thank you, everybody on screen in the room here. Really appreciate your input today. Again, as next steps, we'll do some processing and get back to you on this and how we might move this forward as a group. And with that, we close out our 2025 feedback, learning, and reflection in our 2026 initial planning for priorities. We'll see where we land by the next meeting.
That sounds good. Thank you. Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you.
Very exciting. Okay, Brock, are you ready? I think we're a little early.
What is it gonna take for get me live on your?
You could have your join the Zoom meeting from your laptop. But keep yourself like muted and everything, but then you can share your screen.
Do I have that?
If that's all
I
possible.
go to your email?
Yes, and I can send it right now.
It's short. Not common.
She's what?
She's the most of his contracts. She's like, you can qualify for a good student discount.
This is something that can really run short.
Well, I got my
That's a
was named after him.
My son didn't get me his.
Oh.
So I'm paying more for our insurance because he never got it. Call it, I can't see him.
Yeah.
I know.
I know. He doesn't want.
Launch meeting.
Be able to find the Zoom link?
I keep it there.
Okay.
Now it's hot. It wasn't hot first.
A few minutes I can listen to some of his.
There he is.
Maybe I see that. Let's see. Share screen.
We saw it.
You when you're screen sharing your meetings.
Alrighty.
We're looking at your email.
So should I stay muted, you're saying, on here?
Yeah.
On there, yeah, and
Okay,
also make sure
I'll
that
keep my
the,
video off.
yes, all of that, and it doesn't sound like it's happening, but also have your speakers of your laptop off, but I don't hear any sound coming out, so.
So we're looking good, sounding good.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we're gonna hear a presentation from Brock Dolman now, works at Occidental Arts and Ecology Center. I think probably everyone here is familiar with Brock, and we got a great presentation from you right about this time last year when the Fuels to Flows campaign had just launched, and so we're excited to hear an update, hear more about Gully stuffing, and then hear about a project recently that Christopher was involved in, so yeah.
Right. Thanks, Rose.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody in the room. Hi, everybody out there in your little Zoom rectangle. Yeah, this is an update, as Rose says. I did a bigger show a bit ago. So yeah, it's a little update continuing on this theme around what does it look like as we are appropriately working on forest health and engaging in vegetation management, especially focused on fire and fuel load, invasive species mitigation. How do we expand our relationship to the material that's coming out of those processes to be more creative with them. And so, we have this program at Oxford Arts Ecology Center. Let's see, I forwarded here. Aha, a little delay. All right. That we call our Fuels to Flows program. So we're taking our fire fears and our water woes and connecting them fuels into flows, really looking at cross-sectoral, the intersectionality of this work across landscape, across landowner, across user group, agencies and such. And I think ultimately a primary question we just start invoking for people as you look at a site and want to do the work is that slash trash, that's something you see as a waste product to be made gone away as quick as possible, or do you see it as a beneficial biomass? And if you see it as a resource to be reutilized, then how do you start with what we often talk about as our beneficial biomass portfolio? And everybody's game board in this portfolio based on your conditions, your capacity, your labor, your money, your on-site conditions, your game board will look differently. Gully stuffing isn't for everybody if you have a property that doesn't have any gullies. So don't try to stuff something that ain't there. But you may do chipping, or you may have round poles, or burn piles is what you get to do. There's not judgment on it, but ask a fuller question, I guess, is what we're intrigued with. I will say that in the fire space, and I'm going ahead here on my slide, we've at OAC, me personally, have been burning there, doing prescribed burns since the 90s there and early 2000s. We did one a couple of years ago in 2022 with Fire Forward, where we did model this process of limbing, thinning, and then in our case, we do have lots of gullies. We're an upland property at OAC in the Dutchville Creek watershed. We stuffed all those gullies with all that organic matter in prep as part of the burn prep. It was part of the burn plan. And then once we burned, when that impervious surface of the post-burn surface, which is what happens, all that ash and that extra runoff, we had our carbon catchments in place to mitigate that. And so the sequential flow of how burn bosses and biomass bosses can connect up, I think, is an opportunity for all of us to maybe, we would advocate, tune up on. And we've been doing this work at OAC since 1994. It's our 32nd year of limbing and thinning, and then actually reutilizing that material on site. I will say gully stuffing, which has kind of become the charismatic poster child of this work, is but one of the tactics of a fuels to flows strategy. But we at OAC have got 12 first order watersheds that drain off the property with a landscape that's been logged 3 times over since the 1860s and eroded and plowed and cowed. And so incision and head cuts, boy, do we have a lot of them. And we've been stuffing the heck out of them. And I do appreciate Patrick Henry's a complicated character, but the idea that since the achievement of our independence in 1776, he is the greatest patriot who stops the most gullies. And so that recognition of their, as a biologist and as a salmonid watershed restorationist, and who's recognized that in-stream flows for fish is our biggest limiting factor to the recovery of salmonids, I really appreciate a lot of this work that understands that if we don't slow it, spread it, sink it, store it, share it in the uplands, there ain't no water to leak later longer to be clear, cold, and copious for coho, full stop. And so how do we basically retune ourselves up on our biomass basics, that it's all about photosynthesis and that glucose and oxygen that comes out. If there ain't no water, you don't run the process. And if you don't believe me, let's take a trip to the Mojave versus the Redwoods and tell me about soil carbon in those two spaces. CO2 is not the limiting factor here. And so again, I'm a pyrophiliac. I'm all down with combustion. Fire triangle is a small triangle. The compost pentangle there is a much bigger piece because it's got water and life in it. And I think we can integrate both of these processes as we relate to this beneficial biomass. Some interesting studies coming out. We'd always see work a lot in the whole mountain meadow space in the Sierras and Cascades. And there's a big push to restore wet meadows, especially as snow level rise is increasing and we need more water storage. And we certainly have a Bring Back the Beaver campaign that's in the thick of that in our low-tech process-based restoration field with the Cal PBR network. But this paper that's in process right now, looking at if you would like to restore wet meadows, and if you only put fire on those systems, but you don't address the incision that's dewatering the surface plane that is dehydrating the meadow and driving the encroachment of plants that like it drier, fire just hastens and dries it out faster. And so if we don't interface with the channels, the ditches that are dewatering things to bring the water up and then bring fire in, we won't get there to what we want. And I think thankfully indigenous peoples, a lot of talk about cultural burning, but they did it for cultural water since time immemorial. And I love these wonderful quotes by Chairman Ron Good from Northwark Mono, basically like, who's one of the great cultural fire practitioners, indigenous fire practitioners in the state. You know, he's like, everybody thinks we're the fire guys, but we're not. We're the water guys, right? We refresh the resources so they hold more water. That's the whole point. And that really water is life, and that fire follows water, and beauty follows fire and water. And water's life. And I run a water institute. I got water on the brain on this thing. And so and I'm on fire about that topic as well, right? Those are mutually inclusive. And so how can we do forest restoration where we really understand, as Bill Mollis would say, that the forest is really an above ground lake, and reutilize this material to mitigate the legacy, especially in the drainage network, of the erosion and incision that is both killing our salmon with too much sediment downstream, while it dewaters our hill slope hydrology and water holding capacity. It's a group of us there at Sonoma RCD and with the regional parks have been working on a bunch of projects together, and have this is still in draft best management practices guidance document that we're piecing together. And we're still in the process of trying to get some more money to finalize this and do more peer review on it. So stay tuned on that, but trying to create a set of not standardized recipes, but a suite of tactics that we can get consensus on, both what those look like, and then in the workforce training, train people up so that the regulators have confidence in the QA, QC of the implementation, and the implementers have more context on that. And speaking of implementers, here we have, right, we did this wonderful project this past summer, and obviously the Ag and Open Space was central to that, and Goldridge RCD and Adriana's on there. There's Jason's back in the lower left there. There are a whole bunch of folks, amazing series of trainings of demonstrating many of these techniques, of which I got to lead a sub crew on the gully stuffing piece. But it was a really wonderful process of working with these North Bay Jobs of Justice, and circuit riders got brought up earlier. Conservation for North Bay was there. Others were there. Really fun work. We at OAC have been, again, doing the work. I've been a gully stuff and scofflaw for 30 years, but I finally, to keep Jake Shannon and Matt St. John and those folks at the North Coast Regional Water Board happy, we did, and I'll show you in a second, we did end up getting the official permits to do this work back in 2021. And so as a result of that, after 2 years of implementing, the second year of which was an NBFIP grant on 40 acres, at that point it was after the fire, dealing with that, but so we did a monitoring report, and this is something that's online that you all can look at, and looking at those projects, and I know there's interest in the question around maintenance on these things, and so maintenance is an interesting piece. And I got some photos of the work we did at Christopher's property, Two Sisters Place, and I'm thinking I might drop maintenance notes on those new images as we look at them. But just to say that when the work we're doing, where we're taking this beneficial biomass, that much of it is brown, carbonaceous material, dead material, sticks, limbs, trunks, branches, but we seek out, and we must have the green material, the nitrogen material, our green gully gauze, if you will, our green baleen for filtration, that for any gardener in the house, when we layer in these brush packing systems, these gully stuffing systems, it's green, brown, green, brown, green, brown, i.e. carbon, nitrogen, add water, add life. For the gardeners in the house, you should be saying, oh, he's talking about building a compost pile. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. So we're building these long, linear, massive composting systems that then wet with water, then carbon nitrogen ratios kick in, they begin to break down, sequester the carbon in situ, and then the tree roots of the trees that remained after you limbed and thinned eat the dead bodies of the ones you thinned out on their behalf. And then you get these incredible saturated carbon water holding root beds for the adjacent trees that are producing clean water while we retain upslope water in situ, and also provide significant habitat for small invertebrates and vertebrates, especially the little salamanders, the plethodontids. So I think of these as perpendicular or parallel plethodontid palaces. And so one of the things is that on the permitting side, just by way of updating, is that again, back in 2021 and 2021, we got these, I'm waiting for this slide to come up. We pulled 2 permits. So any channel with a defined bed and bank is a waters of the state. And so you have to get, if you would like to place a fill, which this organic matter is a fill in a waters of the state, you have to get a 401 fill permit from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. One of them, ours is the North Coast Board up here. And also you have to get a 1600 or what's called a lake bed stream alteration agreement. So you have to get these 2 permits to place that fill in there. So we did officially get those permits in 2021 so that when we did our NBFIP project and we did an EQIP project 2 years in a row, we had the proper permits for the placement of that material. We had funders funding us to limb and thin and do forest health and generate the slash. And we had a slash disposal line, and our choice was to then fill with the slash disposal in these ways. By way of update, I will just say that subsequent to that, Sonoma County Regional Parks has gotten lit up on this, Monona, Haviland, Brooke Edwards. And so they've copied and pasted and replaced those permits we submitted. We've done work now a lot in Monterey Redwoods, up at Stillwater Cove, up on Taylor Mountain, and there's big projects coming up in Mark West soon enough. Shiloh's probably on the books. We're looking at Regal. Then there's also the possibility, it sounds like, of Bryn's online and over in Sonoma Valley, right? So regional parks and their overall 20,000 acres are very excited about this integrated work. That point too, not to read all these, but just to say that we've been making great strides with these 2 regulators on increasing their confidence and their sense of what we're doing, the risk-reward relationship. Again, all the work we're doing is in the first order, class 3, meaning it's a seasonal, ephemeral, or intermittent system that does not have aquatic habitat in it. When it rains, it runs and can deliver sediment, but otherwise it's not fish-bearing or aquatic habitats. We're in the uplands, right? And so the risks in that space versus the rewards, increasingly, I think the regulators see that increasing the pace and scale of the application of this in the context of the vegetation management goals, and considering that 80% of the surface area of any watershed by definition is uplands, and the drainage network is the majority of that. Your aorta and your vena cava isn't the majority of your system, it's the capillaries and how your blood is distributed, just like a watershed. So CWW has gotten to the point in this region up here through James Hansen, and this is an email I just got recently, that in short, if you're sticking to upland thinning and handwork, gully stuffing, and dry trib, CWW does not see the need for an LSA agreement anymore for that work, parentheses, given proper design and implementation techniques, of which you are more than familiar with. So that's not a statewide program, that's our local biologists, but we are proceeding forward there. And I will say that the regional board, not ready to go to the no permit thing yet, but they are so interested, they reached out to OAC to develop a programmatic permit where we would maybe take the lead on these fuel disposed gully stepping things. And we were like, we're not really the ones to do that. The RCD is the one to do that. So and we're doing some RCD to see if we can kind of collaborate and hand the ball off to you guys, because I think the founding of the RCD and who you all are as a quasi-governmental entity is really set up to be. And you have I know Sonoma RCD has other programmatic permits that they manage around levies and things like that. So that's underway, just to say. And then I'll leave it at that, but just say there's lots of headway happening in the permitting space locally to push this forward. And then just in the funding space, in the workforce development training space, we've been working a lot with North Bay Jobs with Justice, and then the new entity that's the for-profit connected part of that, which is Resilience Works, part of Resilience Force, the national organization. And so they got funding for workforce training. And so we OAC, and they hired OAC to do the training of their crews. So we reached out to our adjacent neighbors, Two Sisters Place, Christopher and Mary and Heidi and Peter next door. And that is this little, circle over there is that property. And then there's the Camp Meeker Rec and Park District. Thank you to Open Space District and a big support grant. St. Dorothy's helped them purchase ultimately, I have another slide on that, a new Camp Meeker forest. So we've implemented one project of training there that I have photos to show you at Two Sisters Place, and we also have one coming up as soon as it dries out in the summer. So yeah, again, the ag and open space is $2.25 million of our taxpayer money to support the purchase of 356 acres, ultimately in a buyout to St. Dorothy's Rest, to then, it's a complicated thing not to high grade that. And then also the Episcopal Bishop in St. Dorothy's donated 28 acres. So we, the people, now have this amazing 384 acre park that wraps around Camp Meeker, of which the whole southern boundary of that flat line is basically the three of us. It's OAC Sewing Circle, it's Two Sisters Place, it's Mighty R Ranch, and a little bit down there. So we have a really interesting landscape scale relationship and that's really the slope break on if fire's coming up Dutchville Creek and how it works and how it's hence Occidental and to Coleman Valley Road. So I have a long history of collaborating there. And so we did work on this project together back in December. In that crazy foggy month. It was like foggy, and then we weren't getting rain, so the creeks were dry, so we actually could work late into the year, which was unusual. And I would just say that, you know, in my framing of what a fuels to flows workflow sequence looks like is once you've assessed the site and you've marked the trees and you've figured out where the biomass is going to go and you have a sense of that, when the crew is on site, you basically got your sawyers, and then you got your sorters and swampers. The people are taking the material that's limbed and thinned and sorting it and scaling it and swamping it, skidding it, if you will, staging it to the installation site. And then there's the stuffers. So you got your sawyers, sorters, swampers, stagers, and stuffers, right? And there's a flow to that. And some people get to do all those projects and some crews specialize in the chainsaw, you know, the folks who have a chainsaw certification are the sawyering crew. And so you divvy that up depending on your crew. And it works really well. It's been a really fun project to engage with these folks and do that work. We at OAC have been working collaboratively with North Bay Jobs and Justice crews for 5 or 6 years at least now on that. And so these are some shots of some of the work that we were able to do at Christopher's. I know that Christopher's and Two Sisters, their initial grant was limbing and thinning, and they had a lot of pile burning in an area where, to be honest with you, the gullies were far away and the material was too far away to drag over. And then as they moved west, there's this beautiful, lovely incising upland gully system with these head cuts that you can see these pre and post photos. Wherever there's a little red star, that's to try to help guide your eye to that's the same location in the picture, right? Just to give you a sense of what changed before. And so I worked with Christopher and his partners there, keyed in on this eroding upland incising gully that's dumping a bunch of dirt. And we limbed and thinned laterally on either side of that system a certain distance away that was efficient to get at it. We also actually went out into their coastal prairie, which they have an incredible, beautiful old growth coastal Danthonia prairie there, which there was a significant amount of Douglas fir encroachment marching out in that system. And so it was Christmas time and a number of Christmas trees actually got taken off the job for Christmas. But the rest of those the Christmas present the watershed got was we stuffed a whole bunch of green gauze in there. And that was a beautiful reutilization of that material. So when you're thinking about maintenance, so you can see that head cut, and we would have covered the bed of that creek there with green material, tips up, green, brown, filling it all the way up. And then that compost pile, and these long runs of material in the maintenance thing, again, you're making a compost pile. So any good compost pile, once it's breaking down, will begin to settle. So where it settles is one of your maintenance triggers. And right up at the head cut, where you're trying to put that material at the nick point, where the drop off, where the waterfall that's currently scouring is at, that's your most critical maintenance place, because we want to build the initial pile and seal it up against that edge and bring it right up to the lip, but don't block the lip. When it rains, you want the water to sheet off of the uneroded area and dump a deposition of soil and organic matter on top of your structure. That's what makes it work. So don't overstuff it and plug up the face and a grade on the front face, but it will compost and settle. And as it settles, it may pull away from the edges. And so that's where, for first couple of years until it stabilizes, you may need to go back in, quickly pull a bunch of broom in the spring or limb some firs and do a little, it's almost like a little plastering around the edges or lift that up a little bit. I've done that for a couple years on most of these, and then I got 30-year-olds I haven't touched in 27 years. They're golden, they're good. The other thing is that they may mobilize. And so we build stakes out in the field using materials, sharpened stakes. And as we build these things, eventually we vampire stake them in so that they're stuck together. I would say the other thing is you can see we're really fond of using really long members. So in these forests, these overstocked fir forests, for many of us, these long poles that otherwise weren't going to be used for something else. If they're good for firewood or a teepee pole, or they were of enough class that you want to mill it, that's great. But many of them aren't. Leave them as long as you can handle them without them being too weighty, so that you have this longitudinal integrity. If anyone has ever worked with ferro cement, ferro concrete, you know there's 3 elements to that, nouns to that. There's cement, there's aggregate, and there's rebar, and then you add water. What we have here is green gauze as cement, we have sticks and branches as aggregate, and we lace this whole thing through with longitudinal rebar that's durable, long-lasting, breaks down slowly, and gives it rigidity and longitudinal integrity so it doesn't mobilize, but you still pin the heck out of it. If you pull those things off and cite that, your maintenance, I think, gets pretty darn low, because what then ends up happening is as it composts in situ and fills up with water, the adjacent tree roots grow into it and they lock it up. And now you regrade it, and pretty soon the creek's flowing back up to its pre-development hydrologic elevation where it was before the incision occurred. This is just another big long run we did at Christopher's. I keep threatening to bring a tape out there and actually measure the full length of the project area, but probably 1,000 feet, I don't know, or so. We could figure out the volume of that in there. Here was another really big head cut. That was probably 4-footer on the left side around that rock with an undercut that you could have hid several people in that edge to the left. And that was all about ready to collapse and wash away. So that thing is completely stuffed and stabilized and integrated in there. And then eventually we just kept working our way down, and it's field fitting, and you're adaptive, and you kind of got to be on your game, and it's creative. There's basic ideas and principles of working there. This is one of the bigger projects we did at the tail end of the project. And there's a whole bunch of layering. There's 4 to 5 feet of biomass that's 20 feet across in there and 12 feet wide in there. When we add up pounds of CO2, that's not going to go to the atmosphere to combustion. It's on-site retention and carbon sequestration as a GHG emissions reduction. Ooh, there's a lot of potential out there for that to help the county and the state meet their climate emissions goals. And people love the work. Yeah, it's hard. I heard it was hard over there, but you know what? It's hard. Work is hard. So tool up and take care of your back. And so we do have some, we have videos on this stuff. And if anybody wants, we've got a really accessible 18-minute long video about how to stuff a gully there. And then just a couple other things I want to share is that one of the things on the planning side, and the fact that Sonoma County has this amazing LiDAR set, and we have a LiDAR set from 2013, and then we've got the new 22 flyover. So we, OAC, worked with University of Chicago's Data Science Institute, funded by a foundation that funds both of us to work together. And we created what I call the Found Gully model. And he was able to create a whole, I don't even know how these guys do this thing, but a whole metric and, ability to tease out in the layers and find where the purple on these maps are, or the orange is, the differential in aggradation versus erosion over the time scale of the 2 LiDAR layers. And so it's like finding gully needles in a watershed haystack. And it's only for Sonoma County right now. It's piloted at this point. I'm happy to share the link if anybody wants to go surf this and play Find Your Favorite Pixel game. Happy to share that with you. And then just a couple fun things on the policy side, as many in this room already talked about, the RCDs are involved with, submitting to the new Forest Health Program grant guidelines. To the degree that there was a grant that was submitted before, we're just going to dust it off. I would just offer that in the dusting off, the fact is that these new guidelines are different in a bunch of ways. And critically, one of the ways they're different is some of us, OAC, Sonoma Ecology Center, others submitted language to that process. And so now in there about biomass utilization, there's an explicit naming or recognition and support for the reutilization of on-site biomass creatively to provide all these other functions. That's a fundable component, which it was not before. So I would suggest that all you biomass bosses take advantage of this and think about that as you develop your concept in your pilot to get even more holistic than I'm sure your project already was. And then a bigger process at the state level that we at OAC with a bunch of other folks, you can see all the logos on the sign-on letter we sent out, are involved is that CAL FIRE is doing a Cal Vegetation Treatment Program update and a reissue of the notice on that. And we would like to have a whole new section in the Cal VDP that also recognizes beneficial biomass as a fuels to flows framework. And finally, one other thing is while this doesn't really apply to Sonoma County because we don't have a demonstration forest here like Jackson up in Mendocino County, it is worth noting that Chris Rogers, in our World Assembly member, is pushing forward this new Assembly Bill 2494 to engage with CAL FIRE and rethink how it is that these demonstration forests, what they do and that kind of thing. And so I just put that up to say that this work, this consciousness, this thinking, it's the du jour, it's happening, it's the day, and get on the train and such. And so I'll leave you with this one final slide here, which that QR code, you can go to get a bunch of stuff. We do have the website. For the folks in the room, I do have little handouts with that. For the folks in the room, I have Fuels to Flows stickers for y'all. If you're not in the room, come find me. And I can't help myself, but I have beaver stickers because people also want them. And with that, I thank you for your attention. And I think that's my half hour.
Also, since the project was on Christopher's property and you're here with us, if you want to share anything about your experience with the implementation, working with the crew, anything about that, we'd like to hear.
Thanks, Rose, but especially thank you, Brock, for sharing that presentation and especially the project on the Two Sisters land, as we call the parcel. Well, it's always a little challenging going after Brock.
Right.
And maybe if I had a margarita or two, I might be able to, but given that it's not the case, I'm just going to speak as a private landowner who had this unique opportunity to do a Fuels to Flow project. And what really stood out for me from actually being involved with this project, or not to the degree of the crew, but just being the landowner and being there every day, 5 days, 15 people working on this project under Brock's supervision, along with
Kate Lundquist was there for OAC, and then their crew leaders, right?
So how did I get started on this project? Brock is tired of me saying this, but I feel embarrassed as a landowner that I am sending sedimentation from the erosion of my upper tributaries down to Dutchville Creek when all of this taxpayer money is going to trying to restore salmon habitat down there. So I am one of the contributing factors to the degradation of that historically, because I was logged like Brock's Place 3 times. And I've got all this erosion going on. And now we have these more extreme weather events of high velocity rainfall for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And just watching how these so-called seasonal flows all of a sudden go from dry to just massive velocity and volume. And it's not really evident in the slides, but we were to look at the gradation and the drop on my property before I even get the water gets to Camp Meeker's property. I mean, that's a significant drop, just a big drop.
Yeah.
And so the erosion and the sedimentation that's going down has always been really a sore point with me. And I have not been able to find any resources to support some of the work that needs to be done, not only in the upper part, but even down below where it's far more serious situation, where our gully is probably 14 feet deep.
Yeah, we could put half this room.
Pretty serious. Wow. Pretty serious and wide. I mean, I've had James Hansen out there to look at it, but we just haven't figured out how we would even deal with it. So that has been a major rationale for me to try to figure out what to do. So we can get to the upper tributaries as a starting point and start to slow it down. That's a good thing. The other thing that really is hard for me after 4 years of an NRCS grant in doing burn piles is, you know, I've spent most of my life working in other countries with small farmers, and we're always criticizing all the small farmers for slash and burn of the forest. And we're just as guilty here doing slash and burn. We're burning all this debris all the time. And I get the rationale of burn piles. I get the rationale of prescribed fires. Yet I'm still acutely aware of the incredible amount of emissions that we're creating. And I think of all the small landowners in Sonoma County, they're burning piles all the time. I don't know that anybody's tracking that, but I can't believe that it's not a significant amount. And then if we were to add prescribed fires, et cetera. So I'm just telling you, as a landowner, it's been hard to burn all these piles. And then I look at all these encroaching Douglas fir on my coastal prairie grassland. And our oldest one we tracked was 15 to 20 years. So I'm watching my forest area sending out all these Douglas firs up across this beautiful coastal prairie grassland and going, oh, now another project. I got to figure out what to do with all these firs. And then some of them were dying off because once they're out there and exposed, they dry up and they die in the summertime. So then it becomes a fire hazard. So I've been very excited about trying to do more lop and scatter under my NRCS grant, and I was very happy with the support around as another way of dealing with debris. Lop and scatter. So I just throw that out. There's obviously certain limitations of how much is allowed in these grant stipulations, but I would say over the 4 years of doing this grant, we've shifted from pretty much intense doing piles to a whole lot more lop and scatter and less piles. I used to have like 50 to 60 piles at the beginning of the grant, and now my year 4, I was down to about 20 piles with more lop and scatter. So just keeping the biomass around and utilizing it, as Brock said, is really attractive. But I don't know that you really caught on the first slides, but we did take, what did we take? Probably 15, 20 Douglas firs on that coastal prairie.
Big ones and then many dozens of small ones, yeah.
So I was saying to myself, how many burn piles would that have been if we had not done this fuels to flow?
I bet we stopped 100 burn piles.
I think so.
I bet.
So, I mean, you know, we should be tracking, in my mind, we should be tracking how many burn piles we're burning every year in this county in contributing to emissions. But we should also be able to figure out a way to track how much of this wood we are reutilizing in some way. In either, you know, timber, lumber production or fuels to flow. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we should be on the cutting edge of this stuff in our county, in my mind.
Pun intended.
Yeah. What's that?
Pun intended on the cutting edge.
Okay. He didn't show you in the slide, but we have planted over 2,000 baby redwoods on our forest. We did that years ago. Unfortunately, it was a winter drought afterwards, and we lost a lot, but we watered a lot from our pond. And so I don't know, I guess we maybe have 1,500 that are still going, and they're now somewhere between 3 and 5 feet. And when we planted these, we planted them in different places. We learned over the 3 years of planting where the ones that were most successful were. And of course, there were the ones that died from too much sun, not enough moisture. But we intentionally planted along this particular tributary out and along the banks and actually down the slopes of the banks and actually in this tributary. And the beauty of the crew works is that they intentionally flagged where the redwoods are coming up to be, and we created like check dams just past each one. So we're creating little pools of water So getting back to what Brock had said, we're creating these nice little moisture areas that will enable the ones in the creek for sure. And it'll be very interesting to track the growth rates of the ones that are already in the creek on the slopes versus the ones that are further out. And to what extent the redwoods that are even further out or roots are going to grow towards this slowed down water and moisture that's going to be available there. So this interplay of forest and water in the Fuels to Flow campaign, I think is a super critical piece of this, besides all the other rationale. Anyway, I just get back to what Jason, if you're still on, Jason always throws in every presentation, everything he says, 2 words. Actually, probably more than that, but 2 that always stick with me. He always uses holistic and an integrated ecological lens in how we look at this kind of work that we're doing, how all these things are linked, interrelated, and to the extent that we can support multifunctional work rather than just single silo thinking about debris because of wildfires coming through. I think it's going to enhance this whole forest health and watershed restoration work going forward. So enough from me.
Nice. I hired a better folks.
Well,
Taking them out to lunch for that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective. I think we have a few questions coming in the chat. Fred is asking about, let's see.
I stopped sharing here. I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah,
Sure, yeah. And then if anyone online wants to unmute and ask your question, Fred, if you want to ask it, or I could read it out.
Sure, I'll ask it.
Okay.
What about left in place piles if you create these little jackpots far enough away from your chosen crop trees, which are relatively fireproof, and have them, as Brock has talked about, lizard palaces made out of stones? Are these salamander palaces made out of, and bird palaces made out of sticks? So that's for Brock and Christine.
Like I was saying, my methodology is we walk all the drainages and we assess the drainage and the state of the drainage, and then we look at the veg there that needs to be limbed and thinned for fuel load. And what is often referred to as the WILPEZ, the Water Lake Protection Zone, which is a policy we would like to adjust for more active management in that space. And we limb and thin and stuff within that stuffable polygon until it's too far away and for efficiency and such. And then once we're up into the little bit higher, drier world, then we start thinking, is it a lop and scatter space, or is it a wildlife habitat pile space that I think, Fred, you're bringing up? And the answer to that is yes, which for us at OAC, it's often yes, we have hundreds of those. Then the construction of those, and we're always looking at if that jackpots and it throws up 8, 10, 12, 15 foot of flame length, where did we put that pile? And did we put it in the most open place relative to the forest canopy? So those wildlife habitat piles that remain for those benefits are always intentionally left in an area where the potential for jackpotting in a wildfire scenario would, as best as we can do, would not drive fire up into the canopy as best as possible. So we're super attentive to that. And we sometimes build them pretty loose, like little log cabins with a big open space, and then we pile over the top of them. And we've had gray fox and raccoon and skunks and possums and all manner of snakes and lizards and frogs and amphibians living in these things. And I think if you're gonna do burn piles, and then burn that sucker that season, the longer it sits out there, more wildlife it creates. And if you miss a burn season and then you're gonna come back and burn it 2 years later, my observation is it's just a salamander barbecue and an invertebrate barbecue. And if you start burning piles that have been in the I will be happy to go take apart these piles with anybody as a herpetologist if we want to go catch snakes together. They are wildlife magnets very quickly. And I get nervous that there's a lot of latent combustion of these piles going on where unfortunate wildlife have taken up refuge in them. And it's something that needs a little bit more conversation as a wildlife biologist, in my opinion.
Here. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your question, Fred. Does anyone else in the room or online have any questions? Oh, Jill Templeton, feel free to unmute.
Hi, I have been creating stuffing gullies for decades. I never knew it had a name. I just knew it took care of my little upper headland creeks. My question is, you mentioned carbon sequestration being improved by this process, and it's intuitive that that's the case. But how can you measure that, given that all of these counties have to meet their climate goals? How can they look at this as a resource for them to meet their goals?
Well, first I'll joke, good on you, girl, go Gully stuff. And, I mean, the fun part is these ideas are on the cutting edge of a 1,000-year-old concept in many respects. There's people have been doing this work for a long time. The measurement, the quantification, woo, now we're having fun. So there's some interesting work that folks at Trout Unlimited have been doing up in the Navarro watershed on a tributary called Flynn Creek that's actually on Mendocino Redwood Company's commercial logging land. And it's these first order tribs on the side. And so they have a control watershed and a paired watershed. They've been instrumented with piezometers that with computers in them, with pressure transducers for 5 years, several years before treatment and now several years after treatment. And so this question is about water quantity and the amount of water, groundwater being stored or delayed, detained longer, and how much surface water. How are we attenuating the runoff and the retention towards the largest aspiration, which is that will it leak later longer to support in-stream flows in the dry season? And the preliminary unpublished data on that water quantity study is that the treatment reach, which we did, is absolutely holding lots more water, both below ground, longer, more volume and longer, and above ground than the control reach. The carbon question is something that we're looking at, and a few of us are actually, let's see, I'm driving tomorrow to Flynn Creek with Matt O'Connor of O'Connor Environmental, and we're talking about trying to put together an effectiveness monitoring grant. A Board of Forestry CAL FIRE has an effectiveness monitoring committee, which receives proposals on research to understand the effectiveness and monitoring of various innovative ideas. And so we're working on putting forward a proposal. Water quantity is one that really, as I mentioned, people are really into, but how do we look at the carbon sequestration? And Matt just sent me this interesting auger device to think about. Maybe we can auger into some of my older stuffed gullies and newer ones to get carbon cores out of them and try to understand that. We're talking about using some of the stuff in agriculture where they're putting these structures over top of soils and they can capture the oxidation rate and try to, like in rangeland settings where they really quantified, like Marine Carbon Project, Carbon Cycle, the compost application game, like can we modify some of those tools and bring it into the forestry space and understand the carbon cycling? So lots of really good questions and intrigue and interest in that stuff. There's a few pilots going, but if you've got time, capacity, and money and knowledge to support better monitoring and research on this, reach out. It's lots of interest to do it.
Thank you for your question, Jill. Okay. Any other questions in the room, online? Thoughts? I'm thinking about, since we're trying to create more resources and accessibility for private landowners to do this work, Rock, what do you think is a good first step if there's someone who has forest land that they're managing as a private landowner, they're not super connected to like a community forest with resources? Do you think they should just go to the website, start checking it out, or is there a good like first entry point for a private landowner?
I mean, I think if you're, it's like calling up the RCDs as, I think as a resource, because, we at OAC have been working with both Sonoma and Gold Ridge for a long time on this kind of stuff. And you guys have your trusted landowner, interface. We oftentimes get the call at OAC a lot, and I end up going out and doing a landowner walk with these folks. They heard about gully stuffing. Gully stuffing is like technique du jour right now, and I'm a little bit like, it's one thing. It's really a cruel thing. So we'll get that, and then I'll be like, yeah, this looks pretty doable. You know what? We're in this watershed, and there's this salmonid issue or this fire fuel load vegetation management need, and how about we put together a project? And actually the RCD has got this, or there's the local Bohemian Collaborative, if it's within that group, or Fire Safe Sonoma, or we're up in the coast, so being involved with lots of other organizations, I find myself networking them into their local communities and resources and things, and then trying to figure out, yeah, maybe they're a good candidate for an NBFIP grant and they could collaborate with the RCD to do that, of which I'd be happy to then become a sub on that to develop the project and do the training with the folks doing the work to do with the gully stuffing component, much like we're working with Bryn and Sonoma Ecology Center, hopefully coming up here soon, and regional parks actually on a bunch of grants of really other folks are leading the way, have the big vision, have the land. I saw Pepperwood just got one of those big WCB grants on 800 plus acres. That's going to be veg management, and we'll be chatting it up with Devin up there about, all right, how much of that's going to go in the gully, dude? So that's kind of the role we get to play as well, as sort of Pied Piper of running around and helping others do the work. We're not the lead on the project or the primary on it.
Yeah, and if I can add, our contact at the Sonoma RCD is Jessica Politz, and she's working on fuels to flows with Brock and actively seeking funding to be able to devote to projects like this.
Yeah, that BMP guidance doc that with regional parks and some RCD, Jessica Paulus has been absolutely the best lead. So
she's passionate about this.
And the fun part is that Jessica Paulus and I know each other because we were members of the Russian River Coho Water Resources Partnership over a decade that was really focused on in-stream flows for Coho and Dutchville and Green Valley, Margaret West Mill and Grape. And we see our work as a continuation in her work when she went to the RCD on that. As we're still doing that work, and fire's there, and vegetation management is critical, and it's modifying a whole lot of organic matter, and that's just a once in a generation restoration resource that we can either utilize on site for all the benefits Chris was talking about or not. And the future generations will be like, I get a lot of calls, I will tell you, please don't do this to me. Hey, we limbed and thinned and burned our project, and now we can see that we actually have a whole bunch of gullies. Brock, will you come out and help us stuff gullies? And I'm like, no, dude, I won't, because you burned off all the resource to do the work. Working in post-fire conditions, whether it's prescribed burning or a wildfire scenario, there's lots of techniques we can do in a black forest scenario where we're using regenerative salvage logging for stabilizing upland channels, especially, but you got to do it after, as soon as the fire's done, you better get that wood in there, because 90% of the ash and the runoff happens the very first rain event. And you can't say, oh, I'll plan this thing and do that 2 years out. You missed that one. If we're going to do this, we have rapid response. When a wildfire shows up in our county, we need to be mobilized, deal, if we want to stabilize the uplands to keep all the ash and sediment out of our salmon streams.
Hey, Brock, have you figured out cost estimates on how do you roll it into a fuels treatment? Do you add the incremental cost of doing the fuels to flow?
It's a good one, and it's been a little squirrely because so many of the projects I've been doing have been training projects where there's a subsidy for the training part of it, and we're teaching and so. But my observation has been is that when you've got a crew who knows what they're up to and they've got a crew lead on it, and let's say the project is limbing and thinning of X trees per acre, and the slash disposal practice is going to be 4x4 piles with a subsequent crew that's going to come back when it's a burn day and then have the time and burn it. So if you add up the full budget from limbing, thinning to ash pile, and what I've observed is that in the special areas that are within the efficiency zone of the stuffing area, the time it takes to limb and thin and make a 4x4 pile and come back and burn it if you have to host a party to do that versus just stuff it right then and there. And I'm not coming back and burning it. What do you think's the efficiency on? We did half as many acres on either side of that creek at Christopher's project with 0 burn piles in that 5-day push. Could we have thinned and limbed more acres and made more piles? Maybe, but I think that the per acre price of a limbing and thinning is a base price. And then what's the value add to Regional Water Quality Control Board for the water quality benefit? What's the value add to CW for the Coho recovery benefit? What's the value add to California Air Resources Board to the GHG emissions reduction add? And if we put that together, the price per acre might look a little bit more than the cut and run, lop and scatter, kind of bring a crew in from Arizona per base per acre, which none of us can compete with that if we're trying to have not have externalized the cost of that process. So I think we need a full cost accounting on these projects that integrates with all these agencies that have multiple mandates, that we can help solve mandates across 7 agencies simultaneously. And if they all pony up a little bit more, it's not double. It may be a little premium on this. And then there's the workforce piece of that. And so I would like us to be more holistic in how we understand that the ROI on these projects for multiple benefits across multiple federal and state mandates, resource mandates, I think it's a really high ROI. Good.
Maybe I could help chime in on that, Kim, from a contractor's perspective. Which is that, disposal of the material is oftentimes equal to the cost of taking all the material down, whether you are chipping it or piling it. And, when Brock was explaining, the different types of laborers from sawyers to swampers to stackers, it is very similar, the chain of events, right? Whether you're taking it down, swamping it to the chipper, swamping it to the pile. So I really feel like this should be a leading consideration for disposal of material anytime you're proximate to a waterway, right? Because the difference there is if you're chipping it, you've got emissions. If you're burning it, you've got emissions. If you're gully stuffing, you don't, right?
Right.
Lop and scatter is always the most cost effective, but it can be dangerous when you have a lot of material on the ground. And the last thing I just wanted to throw out there is I think we could get data for the whole county through Bay Area Regional Air Quality District, because when you do the pile burning project, you have to put down estimated cubic yards of material to be burned for the pile burning permit. So they should have that data, which would be interesting to see how much cubic yards of material are burned through pile burning in a given year in Sonoma County.
An interesting point, Jason. When I call on burn days, nobody ever asks me how many piles are you doing.
Yeah.
I just burn my piles. But what I hear from you is that's a great resource. That would, through them, we would know from all those calls on burn days how many people in the county are burning in certain days throughout
Right.
burn season.
It might be different per project, but for us, it was just on that simple 1-page pile burning permit application.
And I just want to lift up a piece you said, Jason, which I agree with everything, is that proximate to the waterway. I'm not saying gully stuffing only where it's a tool in the tool. It's back to that portfolio approach in the game board, and each project, each landowner, each set of goals and capacities, we make up our own game board. But let's just ask the question on the front end and start with, wow, all this organic matter is an incredible resource based on photosynthesis. That life is carbon-based and mostly water. How can we reutilize it most effectively for the health of the site, which includes a whole bunch of practices to get these goals. And that's my main little mission. Holistic, integrated thinking. That's why Jason and I get along so well.
Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, appreciate your presentation. And we still have a few minutes if anyone has any last minute questions, but if not, we could move to wrapping up the meeting. Does anyone on Zoom have any other thoughts, questions for Brock? Great.
I guess I'll throw Rose a bullet while we have Brock here for another 5. What about invasive plants, Brock? Are there ones that lend themselves to gully stuffing? Are there ones we need to look out for?
Yeah, great question. Like go team go on all the acres of broom you were mentioning earlier. You've been pulling, so both French and Scotch for the most part, at least that we deal with where I'm at. Right now, when it's showing off its flowers and highlighting itself so we can pull it, and it doesn't have seed on it, the cool thing about both of those plants is that they don't adventitiously root from vegetative matter. So I started pulling broom and stuff in gullies in 1989 and have done so forever. I love broom for stuffing as a green gauze. It's the nitrogen component. As we know, both of those plants are in the Fabaceae family. They're nitrogen fixers. If you pop them up with roots, they also have the nodules on them. So in my metaphor about cement, Portland cement aggregate and rebar, these things are very flashy nitrogen cement. And so if I'm going to be doing broom stuffing, I'm going to be extra hunting, unless it's old growth broom with really big stalks and a lot of carbon. But if it's nitrogen green heavy leafy broom, alfalfa broom, then I'm hunting for all the brown sticks of every size I can get, because I want to optimize the carbon. So when the composting happens, I don't get so much settling. If you just do the entire gully stuffing with broom and it's a 3-foot pack, you come back next year, it'll be 6 inches tall at the bottom. The rate of composting is really quick. So do it then. The seeding game is obviously one of those things. If you're pulling and stuffing when there's a bunch of seed on it, that's not ideal. Arundo is interesting. If you got the root mass out, you're not stuffing that, you can stuff it. Himalayan blackberry, we know any little piece will reroot, so that's not stuffable. So I think understanding the biology of each species that's an invasive you're pulling and how it works. I've done a bunch of grass with that pesky Holcus linatus, purple velvet grass. And if you pull it with the roots, it can resprout. But if you put it on the base as your gauze, because you need gauze between the soil to mitigate any cavitation, erosion at the soil level. So you could lay a bed of that in and then bury it and completely fill it so there's no light and it can't resprout if it's the bottom. If it's mingled in at the top, it'll actually root into your thing and all of a sudden you'll have a velvet grass fluff on the top of your stuffing. So you just got to understand the biology of each species and how it reproduces, whether it's seed or vegetative, and what time of year is optimum and what's its carbon nitrogen ratio and how do you just work with that.
Super interesting idea of burying certain invasives intentionally, kind of like European beach grass in the dunes.
Like
super interesting.
Vinca's a non-starter on that. Ivy's kind of a non-starter. Like some of these things, like let's pile and burn those guys.
Oh boy, yep.
Okay, well, we're gonna wrap up. Thank you all for your awesome questions. Thank you, Brock, for the presentation, and thanks everyone for providing your feedback during our little planning exercise earlier. And we'll see you next month. Okay.
See you folks.